At a quiet college campus, a tragedy unfolded in the shadows, leaving behind a chilling mystery that would confound investigators for years. Tamiya Hill, a bright and promising sophomore, was discovered in the dimly lit stairwell of a dormitory, her life taken in a manner so cold and calculated it would leave even the most seasoned detectives questioning what truly happened. The only clue, a braided cord, used as a ligature, but curiously absent from the scene. Despite access logs showing an unfamiliar card swipe in a narrow 3-minute window, and digital traces leading nowhere, the case soon slipped into the realm of cold files, unresolved and haunting. What really happened to Tamiya Hill? How did a simple college campus become the backdrop for such a disturbing crime? This is a case that defies easy answers. Stay with us as we investigate the evidence, searching for the truth, one piece at a time. Tamiya Hill was a sophomore at a mid-sized college, known for her academic focus and close-knit circle of friends. Raised in a loving family, she was determined to make her mark, balancing a challenging course load with an active social life. Those who knew her described Tamiya as kind-hearted, driven, and full of promise. In the days leading up to her death, there were no signs of distress, no arguments, and nothing that suggested a tragedy was waiting just around the corner. Her death, on a seemingly ordinary evening, shocked everyone who knew her. Tamiya had so much to look forward to, a bright future snuffed out too soon, leaving behind only questions. As we delve deeper into this case, we invite you to subscribe to Beyond the Evidence. Our channel is dedicated to uncovering the untold stories behind real-life mysteries. By subscribing, you'll join us as we investigate the facts, piece together the puzzle, and search for the truth behind the headlines. Tamiya Hill's life, though tragically cut short, was one filled with connections, both deep and meaningful. She was the kind of person who made an impact on everyone she met, whether through her academic pursuits or her warmth and generosity. Her family described her as a devoted daughter, someone who constantly strived to make them proud. Her friends, too, saw her as a source of strength and support. Her close-knit group of roommates shared fond memories of late-night study sessions, heartfelt conversations, and laughter. To them, Tamiya was not just a friend but a sister, always willing to lend an ear or offer encouragement. Outside of her personal life, Tamiya had a reputation on campus as a dedicated student. She was admired by professors for her intellectual curiosity and her commitment to excellence. But as the investigation into her death began to unfold, there was an unsettling realization. While Tamiya had many who cared for her, no one could identify a reason why anyone would want to harm her. She had no known enemies, no romantic entanglements gone wrong, and no hint of any conflict that could have escalated into violence. Yet, something was amiss. Despite her seemingly perfect life, there were cracks in the picture, a mystery to be uncovered. Was there something hidden beneath the surface of her relationships? Or was the killer someone who blended seamlessly into Tamiya's life, leaving no trace of suspicion? The people closest to her, her friends, her family, her professors, were left in shock, grappling with the reality of a life taken far too soon. Each of them, in their own way, was forced to confront the possibility that someone they knew, someone they trusted, could be involved in her death. It began as any other day in the dorms. Students moved through the halls, preparing for their classes, attending to their personal lives, unaware that something dark was about to unfold in the quiet corners of their campus. Tamiya Hill had been seen earlier in the day, as usual, walking between her classes and spending time with her friends. She had made no indication that anything was wrong, nothing that might suggest she was in danger. But by the time night fell, the campus would be irrevocably changed. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came in the form of a dormitory security log. Tamiya's body was discovered in a stairwell, an area not typically used by students. It was isolated and out of sight, a place one wouldn't expect to find someone in distress, much less dead. What was more troubling, however, was the discovery that someone had entered the stairwell just moments before her body was found. Security footage revealed an access card, not belonging to Tamiya, had been used to gain entry to the stairwell. This brief, 3-minute window of time, the only evidence of anyone entering that area, was crucial. The unknown card swipe triggered an immediate investigation into how and why someone had been in that specific location at the exact time of Tamiya's death. The use of an unknown card raised more questions than answers. Digital forensics would later trace the card to an online vendor who dealt in cryptocurrency, a seller with no identifiable personal details, and a record of transactions that seemed to vanish into the ether. Investigators were left with nothing but a trail that led to a dead end. The cord used to strangle Tamiya, which was evident in the markings around her neck, was nowhere to be found. No one could explain where it went or why it was missing. These early signs pointed to a carefully planned and executed crime. But what did they mean? Was this an isolated act of violence, or was there a larger, more sinister plot at play? As authorities continued to dig deeper, the warning signs grew even more unsettling. Nothing about Tamiya's death seemed to make sense. What should have been a simple case now spiraled into something far more complex. As investigators began to piece together the facts, the case began to take a darker turn. The discovery of Tamiya's body in the stairwell was already unsettling, but the details of her death only deepened the mystery. It quickly became apparent that this was not a simple accident or a random act of violence. Tamiya had been strangled, the marks on her neck consistent with the use of a ligature, a form of violent, intentional restraint. The strangulation method pointed to a killer who knew exactly what they were doing, but the real twist came when investigators discovered the unusual nature of the ligature itself. The cord used to kill Tamiya, a braided material, was distinctive. However, when law enforcement scoured the scene, there was no sign of the cord itself. The absence of the weapon added a layer of complexity to the case. Why would someone take the time to remove such an important piece of evidence? Did the killer return to the scene after the murder to retrieve it, or had they left it behind elsewhere? These questions hung over the investigation like a heavy cloud, offering few answers but many theories. The absence of the cord wasn't the only troubling aspect of the crime. The location where Tamiya's body was found, a stairwell with minimal foot traffic, suggested a calculated choice. This was not a place where someone would expect to be seen or interrupted. Whoever had been there, whoever had done this, had carefully planned where the murder would take place. But it was more than just the location. It was a timeline. Tamiya's death had occurred in a narrow window of time, a span of just a few minutes. A swipe of an unknown card, belonging to someone not connected to Tamiya, had granted access to the stairwell at exactly the right moment. Whoever was responsible had orchestrated the situation with disturbing precision. It seemed more and more like this was not a random act, but something far more deliberate. Then there was the issue of digital evidence. The unknown card used to enter the stairwell had been traced to an online vendor who dealt in cryptocurrency. Investigators attempted to follow the trail, hoping it would lead to a breakthrough. The seller's transaction records, however, offered no clear direction. Each trace seemed to vanish into the digital ether, offering no real identities or further clues. It was a frustrating dead end, one that only deepened the sense of helplessness among those working the case. Meanwhile, the campus community was thrown into a state of fear and uncertainty. How could such a thing happen in what should have been a safe place? And with each new detail, the crime took on a more chilling tone. Tamiya's friends and family were left grappling with a truth they were not prepared to face. Someone had planned this murder. Someone had watched, waited, and then struck at the precise moment of vulnerability. The fact that the crime was so calculated, so precise, made it all the more terrifying. It raised a new set of questions. Was this a personal vendetta, or was Tamiya simply an unfortunate victim of something more sinister? As the investigation continued, the sense of escalation was palpable. What was once thought to be an isolated incident was beginning to feel like part of a much larger, more complex puzzle. Every answer led to new questions, and every step forward seemed to open a door that led to yet another dead end. The discovery of Tamiya Hill's body sent shockwaves through the campus community. In an instant, a place that had been a symbol of safety and routine became a haunting reminder of vulnerability. For those who knew her, Tamiya's death was a cruel and inexplicable loss. Her family, deeply devastated, struggled to comprehend how their bright, loving daughter had been taken from them in such a violent and brutal manner. They were left with the piercing question, why her? Tamiya's loved ones, already heartbroken, now faced the unnerving reality that the person responsible for her death was still free. On campus, the atmosphere shifted overnight. Students, once preoccupied with their daily lives, now found themselves in a constant state of unease. Classes continued, but the vibrant energy of campus life was subdued by an undercurrent of fear. Everyone asked the same question, could this happen again? With no clear suspects and few answers from the investigation, rumors began to spread. Some students locked themselves in their dorm rooms, hesitant to walk alone at night. Others avoided certain areas of campus, including the very stairwell where Tamiya's body had been found. The sense of security that had once defined the school now seemed like a distant memory. For the friends who had shared late-night conversations and quiet moments with Tamiya, her death was a personal betrayal. They struggled not only with grief, but also with confusion. How could someone they trusted, someone they'd shared so much with, fall victim to such a violent crime? The fact that the murderer had seemingly no connection to Tamiya, no apparent motive, no prior relationship, left them questioning the randomness of it all. Was this just a tragic accident, or was there a deeper, more sinister force at play? Tamiya's roommates, in particular, were left reeling. They had seen her just hours before her death, in her usual spirited self, and now they were confronted with the brutal reality of their friend's absence. The uncertainty of not knowing who was responsible or whether the killer was still on campus only compounded their grief. Every moment felt like a reminder of the emptiness left in her wake. The investigation, however, provided little comfort. Despite the initial flurry of activity, the case soon began to stall. Detectives and campus security worked tirelessly, but every lead seemed to fizzle out. The card swipe that had triggered the investigation remained a critical point of contention, but with no clear answers from digital forensics, the frustration mounted. The absence of the strangulation cord only deepened the sense of loss, not just for Tamiya's family and friends, but for the investigators themselves. who found themselves searching for clues that seemed to vanish into thin air. For those closest to Tamiya, each day without answers was a cruel reminder of the life that had been cut short. The loss was compounded by the ever-present uncertainty. Would they ever know the truth? With each passing day, the campus community remained on edge, and the search for answers continued, but with no guarantee that the killer would ever be found. As the investigation into Tamiya Hill's death unfolded, a growing sense of urgency gripped the campus community. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a relentless drive for answers. Law enforcement, working tirelessly to piece together the few clues that remained, found themselves stymied by the perplexing nature of the crime. The absence of the strangulation cord and the mysterious unknown card swipe in the dorm's security logs were the few tangible leads, but neither offered any clear direction. As the weeks passed with little progress, the case slowly began to slip into the shadows, joining the ranks of so many unsolved mysteries. But for those closest to Tamiya, the search for justice never stopped. The digital forensics team played a crucial role in the investigation, tracing the unfamiliar card used to gain access to the stairwell. The hope was that it would lead them to a suspect, or at least to a clearer picture of what had transpired that fateful night. The trace led them to an online vendor, someone dealing in cryptocurrency, a seemingly innocuous seller who operated in the depths of the dark web. This revelation was both a breakthrough and a dead end. The transaction records were cryptic at best. The vendor's identity remained hidden behind layers of encrypted communication, leaving the investigators with no real leads. In a world where anonymity was king, digital evidence was proving to be both a blessing and a curse. It was unsettling. The use of cryptocurrency and the dark web suggested a level of planning and sophistication that investigators had not expected. Whoever was behind Tamiya's death had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks, and the digital trail they left behind seemed almost deliberately designed to mislead or disappear into the ether. For every new lead, it felt like they were 2 steps behind, trying to piece together a puzzle that didn't want to be solved. As the digital investigation continued, law enforcement also turned their attention back to the physical evidence. They revisited the crime scene, hoping that something might have been missed in their initial sweep. Yet, the strangulation cord remained elusive, and there were no new forensic clues that might bring them closer to a suspect. The campus, once a place of learning and connection, had become the backdrop for a harrowing mystery that no one seemed able to unravel. Then, investigators began to focus on the time of death. Tamiya had been killed during a brief window, just a 3-minute span, according to the dorm's access logs. This narrow time frame was both a blessing and a curse. The fact that they knew the exact moment of her death should have narrowed the list of suspects. Yet, the more they scrutinized the logs, the more questions arose. Who had access to that card? How did they know when to enter the stairwell at precisely the right time? The timing seemed deliberate, and the lack of answers made it clear that this wasn't a random act of violence. Someone had orchestrated this crime, planned it with disturbing precision, and executed it in a way that left almost no trace. As the investigation stalled, investigators began to question whether this was a case of sheer random violence or something more personal. The absence of any clear connection between Tamiya and the unknown assailant suggested the possibility of a stranger with a grudge, or perhaps even someone who had been following her without her knowledge. But the lack of motive and the sophisticated method of the crime made it difficult to accept the idea that it was random. Whoever was responsible for Tamiya's death was highly methodical, and they had covered their tracks well. Despite the investigators' best efforts, the case began to grow cold. Digital forensics, security footage, and witness statements had all failed to provide a breakthrough. It became clear that the killer's identity might never be revealed, not unless a new clue or new lead emerged, something to turn the case in a new direction. As months passed, Tamiya's case went from a high-profile investigation to a haunting cold case, still open but with few answers. With each passing day, the sense of frustration only deepened. Tamiya's family, friends, and the community were left to grapple with an ever-widening sense of loss, wondering if they would ever see justice for the vibrant young woman whose life had been cut short. The fact that her killer remained unidentified, despite the efforts of law enforcement, was a stark reminder of how fragile the pursuit of justice could be. The digital trail had seemed like it might offer answers, but in the end, it only raised more questions. And so, the case of Tamiya Hill remains unsolved, a tragedy that continues to haunt those who knew her, as well as the investigators still searching for a clue that might one day lead them to the truth. The unresolved murder of Tamiya Hill cast a long shadow over those who knew her, leaving behind a trail of grief, confusion, and lingering fear. For her family, the pain of losing their daughter in such a violent, senseless way was compounded by the knowledge that justice remained elusive. The lack of closure was a constant weight on their hearts, as they were left to question why the justice system had failed them. With no suspect, no motive, and no answers, they struggled with the uncertainty of never knowing who had taken their beloved Tamiya from them. The emotional toll of an unresolved death is something that continues to echo long after the initial shock has passed. For her parents, the future they had imagined for their daughter seemed to slip further and further away, replaced by an emptiness that could not be filled. Tamiya's friends, too, faced an ongoing battle with the fallout of her tragic death. The close-knit group of classmates who had once spent countless hours with her in laughter and study were now left trying to make sense of her absence. The emotional scars they carried were visible in the way they interacted with each other, each one silently grieving in their own way. They tried to keep the memory of Tamiya alive, sharing stories of her kindness, her drive, and her hopes, but the shadow of her violent death was always looming over them. The uncertainty surrounding her killer, the fact that they still walked free, was an agonizing reminder that Tamiya's life had been stolen, and her legacy left incomplete. For the campus community, the consequences were no less profound. The once bustling college had become a place marked by suspicion and fear. Students who had previously walked the halls with ease now found themselves looking over their shoulders, unsure of their safety. The dorms, once filled with laughter and camaraderie, now felt like silent tombs, haunted by the loss of one of their own. No one knew who the killer was, or even if they were still among them. The sense of security that the students once took for granted had been shattered, replaced by a constant, gnawing fear that the killer could strike again. What was once considered a safe and nurturing environment had become a place of uncertainty, where the unanswered questions of Tamiya's death would forever remain. The local law enforcement community also felt the weight of the unresolved case. While they continued to investigate, the lack of new leads and the failure to make progress on the digital trail left many of them frustrated. The case, which had once held the promise of a breakthrough, now seemed like a reminder of how easily cases could fall through the cracks. No one wanted to accept the idea that a murderer could remain free, but the growing coldness of the case was undeniable. As months passed without any significant developments, the frustration among investigators mounted. Yet, Despite these setbacks, they continued to hold on to the hope that one day, the truth would emerge. But for now, the investigation remained stalled, and with it, the possibility of closure for Tamiya's family and friends. The consequences of Tamiya's death weren't just limited to her immediate circle. The ripples of her murder spread far beyond the campus. Her story became a symbol of the harsh reality that not all victims receive justice, that not all tragedies are solved in neat and tidy packages. For everyone involved, whether personally or professionally, Tamiya's death marked a shift in their understanding of what it meant to seek justice and the impact of a life taken too soon. As the investigation into Tamiya Hill's tragic death remains open, the questions surrounding her murder persist. Despite the relentless efforts of law enforcement, the case remains unsolved. The absence of a clear suspect, the mysterious digital trail, and the elusive strangulation cord have left more questions than answers. Tamiya's family, friends, and the campus community continue to live with the painful uncertainty of never knowing who took her life, or why. Her case serves as a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of violence, and the difficulty of finding justice when all the pieces of the puzzle don't fit together. It also raises uncomfortable questions about the limits of modern investigation, especially in a world where anonymity, digital transactions, and encrypted communications can obscure the truth. But with each new piece of evidence, each fresh theory, the hope remains that one day someone will find the missing link, the clue that finally unravels this complex mystery. We now turn to you, the viewers. What do you think happened to Tamiya Hill? Was her death a random act of violence, or was there something more personal at play? Do you have any theories about the mysterious card swipe or the absence of the ligature? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and help us keep the conversation alive. Your insights could be the key to unlocking a case that has left so many in the dark for far too long.